welcome to the Career Corner, where we answer your career cues. And folks, if you haven't caught on yet, cues is questions. We're answering your career questions. I'm your host, Lukas Kauffman, and today, to help us answer your career questions, we have Hana Motoki. We're talking about stepping into pediatric OT. Hana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I'm very excited to be on the show.
And we're so excited to have you. Just before we start things off, dive into some of our more specific questions here. I would love it if you could just introduce yourself to the people. Tell us about yourself, where you went to school, and what you do now for work.
Of course. My name is Hannah. I am a pediatric occupational therapist. I work in a children's hospital in New York. I went to Ithaca College for my undergrad and did the 5-year combined program. So I did my bachelor's and my master's there. So occupational therapy is a profession within rehabilitation where we work on the things that people want to do, need to do, or have to do in their daily life. And I know that sounds really broad, but it's kind of just helping people do their daily occupations. And that's where occupational therapy comes from. And I think a lot of people get confused and are like, do you give people jobs? That's not what we do. So our main domain is working with people on learning how to dress themselves, feed themselves, bathe themselves, and beyond that, being able to do the things to take care of themselves. So participating in schoolwork, their medication management, leading a healthy lifestyle. If it's their lifelong goal to play soccer and kick a soccer ball, how can we get you to do that? So I feel like if any of this sounds like something that you'd like to do, I highly recommend looking into occupational therapy as a profession. We could always use more people. And yeah, that's OT.
So walk us through your journey to becoming an occupational therapist and tell us a little bit about what kind of inspired you to pursue this field.
Yeah. So I have a very cliche OT story, which is I originally wanted to go to school for early childhood special ed. I've always loved working with kids. I've done some like volunteer work at preschools and stuff like that over the summers and thought it was always fun. I did my senior year of high school internship at a like a specialized special needs school in New Jersey. And there I got to kind of see what the teachers do, what the therapists do, OT, PT, speech, music therapists, rec therapists, and I got to see what OTs do, and they always looked like they were having fun. And they always looked like they were playing and laughing with the kids. And I was like, I want to do that. That looks like just like so much fun. Then I looked into OT schools and went to Ithaca for the combined program, which was really, really nice. Um, and and that I feel like is my kind of my origin story into learning what OT is and then kind of deciding to become an occupational therapist.
Awesome. And while we're kind of talking about your time at school and your journey here, if our Career Corner research serves us right, you also had a minor in health policy and management. So
Yes.
I would love to hear how that has how that aspect of your education has played a role in your career and how that kind of influences your approach to patient care, healthcare in general.
Yeah, I loved doing the health policy and management minor at Ithaca. It's such a unique, I think, perspective to have as a healthcare practitioner, kind of really looking into how the policies really affect patients and their families, and how like big systemic like rule like policy can affect really the daily lives of people. And I think like once I started working in healthcare and working with patients, you really, really see that and the impact of different policies, um, and how it can really make or break people's experiences in the world. And I feel like in our hospital, especially, we work with kids that need what we call durable medical equipment. So wheelchairs, bath chairs, walkers, standers, and those are really hard to get, really, really hard to get. So it's always a fight. And writing these letters called letters of medical necessities to the insurance companies, to Medicaid, to get them to approve this very medically necessary device. So, and you can see like how the different policies that are implemented on a national level, especially with Medicaid, right? Like impact the child's ability to have a wheelchair that is their only mobility need. So I think that's been a really awesome perspective to have as a student, and then kind of bringing that over into becoming a clinician and having and knowing the impact of how things just outside of that person's scope and looking at it from like a global holistic level is, I think, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, awesome. And kind of on that same topic, you mentioned, writing letters to Medicaid, big kind of federal places, I don't know what to call it, organization, whatever it is. Uh, Obviously, we've just come off of a pretty polarizing election, and there's a lot of proposed changes to. I know healthcare is one of the big things that it might be changing in the years to come. Do you anticipate any changes to your work? And do you think it's more important for people to know about your field now than before?
I am hoping that there would are not going to be many changes. I'm hoping. I know that's a very optimistic and naive kind of perspective. I hope that regardless of what anybody's political views are, that people understand that healthcare is a right, right? Like that people should always have the right to healthcare, that people should always have the right to whatever they medically need, right? Um, with that said, I think it is also so important to use this time to talk about how important things are, like especially healthcare, especially therapies. I know that nothing can be what is the word? Like nothing is guaranteed. That's what I'm trying to say. Nothing is guaranteed probably in the next 4 years. So I definitely agree. It is such a great opportunity to really be vocal about how important therapy is, how important durable medical equipment is, how important it is for families to have what they need so that their child can become independent, so their child can become as autonomous as they can, so they can grow and experience the world in a way that a lot of other people can. And I think like I work in pediatrics, but OT stems beyond the pediatric lifespan. So even with like your older grandparents or older adults, like or even adults, right? Like everyone has a right to have what they need to be as independent as possible. And I think I hope that things will become easier instead of harder. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging time to be in any field, I think.
Yeah, all the fields,
Yeah.
they're feeling the pressure. Thank you very much for sharing on that subject. Pivoting towards back on getting back on track. You mentioned that in your time in school, you got to go and see like what the OTs are doing, and that's what kind of drew you to the field. You saw the kind of day to day. So I would love if you could tell us about your day to day and your job
Yeah.
now, and what kind of care and services you provide to your patients.
Yeah, so I work at a hospital, a very unique hospital that has three parts, is how I like to explain it. There is an inpatient rehabilitation side, and that basically just means you go from acute care, so where a lot of people think a hospital is, with an emergency room and intensive care unit, but you are stable enough to that level of care, so you come to inpatient rehab. This is what I like to tell my teenagers: therapy boot camp. Like you're here for therapy to get you stronger, to get you the skills you need to be as independent as possible, to get you as close to baseline as possible. And we have intensive therapies, and you could be getting anywhere from, I want to say, like an hour to 4 or 5 hours of therapy a day. It really depends on each child, each case of the frequencies of therapy they get, but I inpatient rehab is intensive boot camp therapy. And then we also have a pediatric long-term care facility. So a lot of the kiddos there, they're there because their medical needs cannot be met at home. So that is their home. We try to make it as much of a cozy home atmosphere as possible. And we treat the residents there, they're not patients there because they're living there, as with as much normalcy as we possibly can give in an institutionalized setting. And then we also have something called the day hospital, which is kind of like a bridge program between being an inpatient rehab, so boot camp, and going back to a community-based school where you can go home, be discharged home, and you can be bused into our school and continue to receive more intensive therapies than you would in a community school, and bridging that gap until your needs are fully able to be met in the community. So what my day looks like and my caseload looks like is a mix of all three. And really ranging from 0 to 21. So I treat patients anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour every day, depending on the kiddo. And I go kind of from like 8:30 to 12, treating back to back to back. Take a little break where I document and take a little bit of lunch, and then I will treat again from probably like 1 to 3:30, 4.
Amazing.
Seeing anywhere from, I want to say 10 to 12 patients a day.
Wow. So very busy day.
Yeah, very busy day. I like it busy though. So I'm very, very thankful for kind of the flow of everything. It makes every day go by so quickly.
Yep.
And so much better than, a slower day in my preference.
So a lot of the times, in my experience at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like a lot of the times when younger people are in a situation and they're receiving therapy, there's also a lot of the times it's not the therapy that they're getting maybe from you as an occupational therapist, and that might not be the only kind of therapy they need. They might need physical therapy or speech therapy. So I was wondering, how do you collaborate with other healthcare professionals to provide your patients with comprehensive care plans?
That's a great question. So OT, PT, and speech, I feel like we collaborate all the time. In our hospital, we tend to be a smaller hospital, so like we have a chance to communicate and collaborate all throughout the day. We have a HIPAA compliant like texting system where we're like, hey, like just giving you a heads up, like this happened in session. Is there anything I can carry over? For example, with speech therapy, if they have a AAC device, which is kind of like I think it stands for augmented alternative communication device. So like an iPad with icons that helps kiddos talk if they're not able to verbally talk yet. Like, how can I carry that over into OT? Or talking to the PT me, like, how can I carry over what the walking technique or weight shifting technique into OT? And they'll all do that for us as well. How can we carry over the strategies you're using in OT to speech or PT or whatnot? So I feel like with them, they're so easy to collaborate with because we're all working towards the same goal. And like I said, with having it being like more of a boot camp setting, we're all seeing this child for quite a lot amount of time. And we're seeing that progress happen every day. And so us three are really easy to collaborate with. The physicians, again, like thankfully our hospital's smaller, so their doors are always open. If I have a concern, I just knock and I'm like, hey, I just wanted to bring this to your attention. You probably know, but I'm concerned about XYZ. Or there was one time a patient was doing something really wonderful that they haven't done ever. And I texted the physician. I was like, hey, if you want to see our kiddo do a dance party, come on over. Because I think it's also important that, working as a rehab team, they see all the progress that they've made, not just the bad stuff, or not just the medical stuff for the doctors and the nurse practitioners. So that's always a fun, team collaboration that we're doing. We also have things called care plan meetings where we all sit down, first with the team. So it'll be the OTPT, speech, doctors, nurse practitioner, nurse discharge coordinator, social worker. We all sit down, we talk about a case. We talk about what needs to happen for them to be discharged. What does discharge look like logistically, functionally, from like a social perspective? And then we'll bring in the family. And if the patient is older and they are able to understand and participate in the meeting, they will also come as well and have a time to sit down and talk about, again, like, what does it mean? What do you have to look like to be discharged safely? So I feel
Incredible.
yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities, especially in a smaller hospital, to collaborate with everyone, which I'm very, very thankful for. And I learned so many things about what everyone else does that I think makes the whole team stronger when we can understand what each of us brings to the table.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's got to feel like, especially for the patient, like constant improvement through everything that you're doing. You don't have to backtrack and talk about what you just did with, with your OT, with your PT, because you guys are all in communication. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling, and I'm so fortunate to have a team like that.
Amazing. So this point, we're going to pivot towards the addressing more advice kind of stuff for, reflective. We've talked a lot about what you do and your experiences, and now we'll talk now about it more kind of advice for students. So I want to start things off in this kind of another pivot we're doing. I'm really on it with the pivots today. So, and speaking of pivots, the transition from being a student to being a working OT is a gigantic leap. So I wanted to ask you about what were the most challenging aspects for you as a new graduate in your field?
Yeah, it is a big jump. It's such a big jump. I think going from learning about what OT is to doing OT is so different. And also being a student during a clinical where you're supervised all the time to being on your own is also so different. So my advice is always to be patient with yourself. It is, and acknowledge that it is a really big jump and it's okay to take time to get used to that jump. For me, the biggest challenge was time management. I think as a new grad, I wanted to be there for everything, address every single concern that was raised for all of my patients. And it was, I think it's hard to know how to prioritize your time sometimes. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. I think it was all a very, very wonderful learning experience where I got to really learn about the profession, and in a rehab setting they're living there, so like you get to really connect with these families and really help like see their journey towards recovery. With that said, self-care and work-life balance is also incredibly important for the, you know, to be a practitioner for a long time and to sustain your ability to provide good care. So especially, like I said, as a new grad, take time for yourself, build in systems to replenish your energy, to be able to have fun outside of work, to have times built in strategically to relax. Also, leave work on time if you can. That's always a good thing to practice.
Yeah, I live by that.
Yeah.
Great
Definitely.
advice. Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of people tend to forget that, it's you're not going to do a good job taking care of people if you're not taking care of yourself. So
Yeah.
that's a really great piece of advice. And speaking of advice, what advice would you give to students currently studying occupational therapy, especially those interested in your field of pediatrics and in a hospital setting? Any advice you would have for students who are looking to kind of get to where you're at?
So for any OT student, like definitely take in as much information as you can from school. I think the more you can be mindful about what you're learning in school, even if it's like, oh, the one more assignment. I don't understand the point of this. I promise there is a point to it. And the more you can really embrace that, I think is going to set you up for success. And also, as you're starting out, there might be some reference material that you want to look back on, like your pediatric theory textbooks or your anatomy textbook. So if you didn't rent them and you have them, like, don't throw them out, keep them. And for people who want to go into pediatrics, I recommend really being selective about which clinicals you do as an OT student, and where you're being placed for your pediatrics. I think that can teach you a lot and give you a little bit of a taste into what setting within pediatrics you might want to go into.
And then do you have any advice for OT students who are looking to work in a hospital setting?
Sure. I think that, like, it's important to note the different types of hospital settings. We have acute care, we have subacute, we have inpatient rehab, we have ICU, adults, pediatrics. There's so many different types. So I think really knowing like what your priorities are and what kind of like clientele you want to work with is going to be really helpful in learning what kind of hospital setting you want to be in. But also know that no matter what hospital setting you choose, hospitals are fast paced. They do require a lot of juggling, a lot of time management, people management, thinking on the spot. So if that's something that you enjoy and you know that that's a strength of yours, I think a hospital setting is really, really fun. And you get to meet so many different people, different families, different diagnoses. So it could be really, really fun and rewarding as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So we are closing in on our time here on the end of our show, but I do have one more question. So we've talked about advice for current students, and this is going to be also advice for current students, but more from the perspective. So they've made it, they're an OT, they graduated, they got their job. Do you have any inside tips and tricks that you've learned in your time as an OT that you could share to help students, like they can write it down for the future, or if they just graduated, any kind of beyond taking care of yourself, obviously, because we covered that part, but any other tips and tricks you might have?
Um, I would say if there is somewhere that you're wanting to work in, just just send a cold email. You never know until you take the chance. It's always going to be a no if you never take the chance. And I live by that. My current job, I actually just did a cold email to the director, and they just happened to be hiring at that time. So you never know if there's somewhere you have your heart set on, just always give it a go. And another motto that I kind of live by is everything is as temporary as you want it to be. So if you are in a situation where your first job or your second job or whatever is not a good working environment for you and something's not working out, then that was meant to be, and that can be the end of your journey. And that doesn't mean that it's a failure or you're a quitter or anything like that. It's as temporary as it's meant to be, and then moving on to your next journey. Lastly, if you can, and this is something that has helped me as a new practitioner, going and working for somewhere with a very healthy work environment. I think that was my priority when I was looking for a job. And I'm very, very fortunate that I ended up in a department that is extremely supportive and nurturing. And they have really fostered my clinical reasoning skills and to become the best OT that I can be. So if if you have a little bit more flexibility into what kind of setting you want to work for, I would definitely just focus on having a good work environment, especially in the beginning as a new grad, because that mentorship and that supervision is going to be so critical in you becoming a good OT.
Awesome. And I feel like great advice for any career, really. I mean, beyond the specifics of like finding an OT job that has a good environment, just all that is great advice for everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for everything today. It was so great to have you here.
Thank you. I
And
really appreciate it.
So glad that we were able to work out there. The folks at home, they don't know, but now that I'm going to tell them we were trying to schedule. We're shooting it in the wee hours of the night, 7:30 p.m. But it's the Career Corner, and folks, you do not have to wait for our next episode to get career guidance. You can visit drop-in hours from 11 to 2 in Muller Faculty Center 101. I'm Lukas Kauffman, and this is Career Corner.